All right, YouTube, it's time for final Iowa predictions. I've been predicting it anyway, but I think at this point it's pretty clear to say Donald Trump is probably going to win Iowa. Not certain, he could be overestimated in his support by, numerous polls from numerous firms by 5 to 10 points. Honestly, though, I don't see that happening. It's extremely unlikely. Even like in 2012, Santorum wins the state by less than a point. Being around tied with Romney, they end up around tied in the actual voting. I think Santorum overperformed slightly. The difference being Santorum at the time, I believe, was rising in popularity in Iowa. That's why there was such a close divide between them. Ted Cruz is falling in the polling. And not only is he about 5 or 6 points behind Trump, he's actually descending now. Who is he giving that support to? I mean, he's not giving it to Trump. Trump's not on the rise right now. He's giving it to Marco Rubio. And there's my prediction for the most likely Iowa surprise. There are two possible surprises. In fact, both could happen, statistically speaking. The first is that Marco Rubio, who was in a fairly distant third until, a week ago, is ascending sharply right now. He's actually robbing support from Ted Cruz. Part of this, the Cruz's slow death spiral began with New York values, as I predicted. He had been leading by a point or two. It was almost a statistical tie. Donald Trump pulled ahead. He's now 6 points ahead ish. That's why I think Trump will win, because Ted Cruz quite clearly is losing support fairly quickly right now. I think it was Rubio's debate performance, though, that really cemented it. And this shows, in a way, Donald Trump's genius. With his absence from the last debate, again as predicted, Rubio and basically it was Punch Ted Cruz Day for all of the other candidates, especially Rubio. See, Rubio's running in third. He's also very good at debating. He can out-debate Ted Cruz. They both look a little bit phony. They have sort of the used car salesman thing. But Rubio has slightly better oratory skills than Ted Cruz does. Rubio's just slightly better, which gave him the edge. He lashed out at Cruz probably as Trump expected he would, because Rubio he wants to win. He's still got enough support so that in theory he could have done it with a Martin Luther King moment. But he'll settle for second place, and because he's robbing Cruz's support, even though it's very late in the game, his level of ascent is probably high enough to bring the vague possibility that he could supplant Cruz for second place, in which case the first surprise could be Ted Cruz fails to place in the top two and has to make do with a close third. That would be the end, fundamentally, of Ted Cruz's campaign. It would also ensure Trump the nomination, because the states where Trump has the most support are also the states where Rubio is sort of the second wheel. Obviously, Trump is going to win, I think, New Hampshire, especially if he wins Iowa. Rubio coming in second, giving himself a boost at Ted Cruz's expense, which is what appears to have happened in Iowa, would keep Ted Cruz from being able to be competitive in a place like South Carolina or Nevada, where he's running in second. This helps Trump first and foremost. It doesn't help Rubio. He's still not going to be able to rise above Trump's numbers in such a crowded field. Trump is leading by double digits in New Hampshire and South Carolina, and has consistently for 5 or 6 months. The possibility of him losing those states, unless he has a disastrous showing in Iowa, like he magically comes in 5th place, I just don't think the possibility's there. Then, after Trump coming in first, and either Cruz or Rubio, probably Cruz, I think will hold on to a second place finish, but I think he'll underperform slightly. I think Rubio will outperform slightly, which isn't going to look good for Cruz anyway. But he gets second place. He gets to muddle along through it. I think in fourth will be Carson. He's got almost 10% support right now in the aggregate, and it's been relatively stable for some time. That's sort of a floor level for him, or not far above his floor, which means he'll probably get fourth. And then I think the second surprise, Jeb Bush is polling in fifth, which, typical Jeb moment when he claims that as a victory, which he probably would. But Rand Paul, who's running in sixth, could theoretically supplant him. He has the grassroots Ron Paul Days support in Iowa. He does have very fervent supporters. There is reason to believe that turnout among Rand Paul supporters will be higher, in which case he could supplant Jeb and bump Jeb down to 6th. Now, is this really a victory for Rand? No. It sort of puts him at the head of the pack of low-tier candidates, which could, in theory, help him stick it out through Super Tuesday at least. I would welcome it. I want to see Rand Paul do well because it means some people have common sense. But it would really hurt Jeb potentially more than it would help Rand because, here you've got this multi-million-dollar candidate with the Bush family name and obviously a large number of establishment endorsements coming in 6th place in Iowa. While he's not even running in the top 3 in New Hampshire either. I mean, he's getting supplanted by Kasich in New Hampshire. That doesn't look good for Jeb Bush, specifically from the concept of, am I going to get donations to continue my very expensive campaign? I think that Jeb, after Super Tuesday, will be one of those that drops out. It'll either be him or Christie. As for who comes in 7th, 8th, 9th, it doesn't really fucking matter. None of the other candidates really have a pulse beyond Jeb and Rand in Iowa. It's like Kasich. Kasich doesn't have a pulse in Iowa either, even though he's running 2nd right now in New Hampshire, or a very close 3rd. It's actually funny to see. He's put everything on this one state that he can't possibly win in hopes of getting a 2nd place finish just so he can get his name in the papers, I guess, and use that as a political leverage for the Super Tuesday states. I don't think it'll work. It's been tried before. Santorum did it with Iowa. Newt Gingrich did it with South Carolina last time around. Did it carry them to victory? Does anybody... You ask the average person about the 2012 election, are they even aware that Newt Gingrich was in it? Most people probably aren't. They've forgotten all about it. Are they aware that Santorum was in it? Only if you remind them through the news. The only 2 names they remember are the candidate who won the nomination, Romney, who was a failure in the general election, which was very funny to me. Because he was a Mormon. I don't want a president who can't suck down a Red Bull and chain smoke some Marlboros to have, get a 6 a.m. call about a nuclear strike. I really don't. That's why I didn't vote for Mitt Romney. I was a Ron Paul supporter, and Ron Paul's the other one you remember, because he was the maligned outside candidate who never quite won a state, but had double-digit support in most states, did well enough to, talk about buy gold, which is basically why he was there, and to lay the groundwork for his son, who has fallen flat largely, but could outperform in Iowa. Again, as for the other candidates, no one gives a fuck about. Who gives a fuck about Chris Christie? We know he's not going to be nominated. I mean, he would be fatter than President Taft and twice as corrupt as any of the Steel Baron carpetbag era presidents. Nobody gives a fuck about him. Carly Fiorina, do most people even remember that she's in the race and that she happens to look a little bit like a hyena? No, nobody knows who this is. Another thing I think you'll see after, I predict, Iowa will go for Trump. Even if it doesn't, it's largely inconsequential because he's so far ahead in the other states. But let's assume he wins Iowa, gets a mild bump or even no bump at all. He goes on to win like New Hampshire and South Carolina. At that point, some of these candidates will see the writing on the wall and drop out. Most of them will stick it in until Super Tuesday, and that's when they'll drop out, when they realize Trump's dominated every fucking state. But I think that Santorum and Huckabee, and you might not believe me because they seem like if they were to drop out, they would endorse, Carson or Ted Cruz, someone who's more of an evangelocon. Someone who talks about Jesus a lot more than they talk about the Constitution, or that they talk about border security or taxes or something. You would expect them to support somebody like that. I think they'll support Trump. I think that when Santorum and Huckabee inevitably drop out, it'll be Trump that they back if he wins the first 3 states, and I'll tell you why. They appeared with him on stage at the Veterans Rally. Why did they appear with him at the Veterans Rally? Well, it's because they know that they're not actually going to get nominated. They know that. They don't have a pulse nationally. They're in it for single-issue purposes. They're hoping to get some donations and some press and, talk to their friends and family, and they get to have the campaign bus for a little while. It's exciting, and maybe they get a show like Mike Huckabee had before. It's because they know they're not going to be nominated. They're hoping to have just enough political leverage to help whatever candidate they decide to endorse and maybe get a cabinet position. Maybe get an appointment as ambassador to some important nation. Something like that, or maybe just get a kickback in general. So they're going to try to do Trump a solid in hopes that Trump, who is known for his business deal making, will do them a solid when he gets elected, which, if he is the nominee, I predict he will. He'll be the next president of the United States. You might think that's scary. You might think that's great. I don't fucking care. I don't think that Hillary's campaign is a fucking train wreck. Hillary does not know what she's doing. She's already had one stroke. I'm surprised the stress hasn't caused her to have another. All of a sudden her face just fucking droops while she's on stage. She starts baby talking to the crowd. She's talking to Bernie Sanders. Everyone thinks that she's just being, really critical and nasty to him and baby talking at him to pretend that he's the one that's actually the baby, sort of inflection-wise. In reality, she's had a massive stroke, and then all of a sudden she slumps to the stage floor, and then people finally realize, oh shit, the front runner's dying of a stroke live on stage in front of millions of Americans. I would find that funny, by the way. After all the people she's had killed, both foreign and domestic, I wouldn't feel sorry for her in the least. I'd laugh about it, honestly. She's that corrupt. She's that terrible. She's fucking terrible. If Bubba was tolerable, Hillary Clinton's not. Sorry, doesn't make me a sexist. I also don't like Fiorina, but not because of her vagina. It's just because she's fucking retarded. But then again, I don't like Ted Cruz, and Ted Cruz has a dick, so, am I sexist against men? Apparently not. But yeah, that's what I think about Iowa. I think Trump will probably win. I'd give it about a 90% chance. There's still the possibility that he's vastly overestimated, but look at the RCP. I told people before, like the Monmouth poll, ignore single polls. Look at RCP. Look at an aggregate. This is why I was predicting states fairly competently last time around. More on par with like Nate Silver than just someone who says, oh, well, Romney's going to sweep all 50 fucking states. Like fucking, who was it? I think it was Glenn Beck, the one that's going after Trump now. He said, oh, there's going to be a landslide for Romney. You're only saying that because you're a fucking magic underwear wearing piss-stained Mormon like he is. That's the only reason Glenn Beck had a fawn show over Romney. Because his views are basically the same as fucking Obama's anyway, when you really think about it. He only liked him because he was a fellow cultist. No, you look at the aggregate. Look at RCP. Take the lowest number for Trump in recent polling, which is 28. Match it up against the highest number in recent polling with Ted Cruz, which is 27. Trump's still winning, even if you assume that Ted Cruz's support is generally underestimated and Trump's is generally overestimated. You have to assume that not only are the polls consistently wrong in specifically skewed directions, but then you have to add another layer onto it and say turnout for Cruz is just going to be higher, or a lot of these Trump supporters will stay home. I don't see that happening. When I look at Trump's rallies, I say this is a candidate who probably is going to drive record levels of turnout within his own support base. He could outperform. I'm not going to operate from the anticipation that he does. I'm going to operate from the anticipation that it'll be on par, and I still project him as winning by a good 5 points in the state of Iowa. Now, for somebody who was neck and neck with Ted Cruz, this is great, because that was really the only opposition to him getting the nomination. Nobody's really competing with Trump in New Hampshire and South Carolina. The problem is, a lot of these people that want to wait it out and wait till the field thins and then strike Trump because of his supposed low ceiling, you're not going to get the opportunity to do that, because when he wins those first 3 states, he's going to become so monumentally popular among people who would be supporting other candidates that his ceiling is going to be a hell of a lot higher. Mitt Romney hovered around the 40s for much of the campaign in 2012. It's not like he suddenly rose to 90% support. Until the very end, he never cracked like 60 or 70% of the support. And he was running against just 3 other people. One of them was a fringe candidate who just talked about gold. One of them was an evangelocon who basically talked about stoning gays to death and how gay people had caused natural disasters. The other one was Newt Gingrich. Nobody took him seriously, and yet even Newt Gingrich managed to win South Carolina. I don't see anyone competing for any of the first 3 states with Trump if he wins Iowa. And I think he will. I think he's going to win the state of Iowa, honestly. And we'll see if I'm right come tomorrow. Tomorrow night we'll know generally what's happening. It could be that I'm completely wrong and Trump's support has been vastly overestimated. But again, you have to assume that the polling aggregate is wrong and that virtually everything else is just skewed in some pro-Trump direction in order to project him as losing the state of Iowa. People that are talking about, well, Santorum won Iowa and he didn't win the nomination. Yeah, Santorum was behind in New Hampshire and South Carolina. In 2012, Romney won New Hampshire, and Gingrich won South Carolina, with Romney close in second. Santorum won Iowa by a very narrow margin, but we're expecting Trump not just to win one of these first states. If we go by the polling that's there right now, he'll win all three of them. So it's not really comparable to Santorum. If you want a Santorum, you're talking about Ted Cruz 2 weeks ago. Now he looks weaker than Santorum was in 2012. Meanwhile, the real Santorum is probably going to drop out and endorse Trump at some point in the next few weeks. That would be magic bullet to Ted Cruz's campaign, because here you've got a formerly well-liked, hardline evangelical, basically blow up the abortion clinic and hang the gay people, endorsing Trump, who supposedly isn't a real conservative. My goodness, Ted Cruz talks about the Constitution a lot for somebody who's not eligible to run for the office of the U.S. presidency and who thus is violating the U.S. Constitution on a daily basis. Trump will probably win Iowa. Yeah. Whether you like it or not, I mean, you don't have to be a supporter of Donald Trump to see the writing on the wall. As for the Democrats, might as well project that too. I think it's fairly common knowledge that Hillary Clinton's going to eke out a win there. She's going to look weak, but I think at the end of the day, she's going to win in Iowa. I just don't... Bernie Sanders does have a lot more enthusiasm, and I think that might close the gap. But the latest round of polls have Hillary slightly ascending and ahead by a few points. Now, again, we have to assume quite high turnout for Sanders. I don't see that happening. A lot of the under 30 Democrats that really are turning out to support him, they're jaded with politics at the moment because of how unpopular Obama is in this climate, in this atmosphere. It's the outside party, the Republicans that don't currently control the White House, that are more energized. You see more energy in Jeb Bush's campaign than you see in Clinton's campaign. And Jeb Bush is running in the single digits in most states. So, take that for what it is. I don't expect the Democrats to perform well this year unless the Republicans ignore Trump and ignore his qualifications and the fact that it takes most of the wedge issues off the table and nominates some idiot like Ted Cruz. If they nominate somebody like Cruz or Rubio, they'll probably lose regardless of who the Democrats nominate, because the power will be with the Democrats. They'll be able to use the wedge issues. They'll be able to energize the youth more. With Trump, they can't really do that. He would probably win the presidency. Again, whether you like it or not. I mean, I'll be voting for Gary Johnson. That's about all. Peace out.